Welcome to Discovering Africa Through Technology, the podcast series that showcases the brilliance of Africa's great minds, innovators, and experts as they tackle complex challenges with homegrown solutions driven by knowledge, technology, and innovation. Our podcast is inspired by the African Union Agenda 2063 Aspiration 7, which seeks to rebrand Africa and change negative narratives and perspectives through science, technology, and innovation. We believe that Africa has the power to solve its own development challenges and become a strong, united, resilient, peaceful, and influential global player and partner. Join us as we explore the transformative potential of technology in Africa with your host, Razia Kulatein Mwanga, and learn from the experts driving change on the African continent.
Welcome and thank you for joining us. In this episode, we were privileged to talk with two African Union commissioners and one director. Her Excellency Abou Zeid, who is the Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy Directorate. His Excellency Ambassador Alfred Chiza, Muchanga, Commissioner for Development, Tourism, Trade, Industry and Mining. And also Godfrey Bahiigwa, who is the Director of Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy, and Sustainable Development. We had an opportunity to get an overview of the Commissioner and the Director's work and performance of their Directorate and departments based on their mandates. And also, they answered questions from African Union Agenda 2063 Pitch Zone Award winners. Apart from getting an overview of the work and performance of the directorates, we shall also get an opportunity to get specific answers and insights on the overview of the role of the science, technology, and innovation strategy for Africa to rebrand and change narratives and perspectives to make Africa strong, resilient, united, peaceful, and an influential global player and partner with significant role in world affairs through technology and innovation. His Excellency, Ambassador Alfred Chiza, Muchanga.
I begin by saying that the future of Africa is based on a deeper economic integration. When our leaders formed the Organization of African Unity in May 1963, some of them called for the establishment of an African common market. And that idea did not die. We started by coming up with regional economic communities across Africa. And right now, there are 8 regional economic communities officially recognized by the African Union. I've requested my secretary to give you a copy of my article on this, so I don't need to go through these 8 regional economic communities. And with a view to implementing the treaty establishing the African Economic Community. My colleagues will be able to give you a copy of that. We decided in 2012 to start negotiations for a continental free trade area. And as the negotiations proceeded, it was called the African Continental Free Trade Area, which has now a secretariat in Accra, Ghana. So I was saying we are going to have 2 studies. One study is going to be undertaken by the African Trade Policy Center of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. And the other study is going to be undertaken under sponsorship by the European Union so that we get more information on how they came to establish this European single market. So this is where we are. And in order to ensure that we create a market that is able to thrive, we're also investing in manufacturing and agro-processing. We have what we call the regional and continental value chains. And we've identified the 5 priority areas: the automobile, the baby food, textiles, and pharmaceuticals, among others. Altogether, we are mapping regional and continental value chains across Africa. Work continues, but we've started on those key ones. And we have also teamed up with our colleagues in dealing with agriculture, the other African Union Commission, to develop agro-parks across Africa, encompassing 2 or more countries. And a maiden venture is the agro-parks program between Zambia and Zimbabwe, so that Africa becomes self-sufficient in food in the near future. So this is where we are on economic integration. The road continues. After the customs union, we are going to have a common market and eventually the African Economic Community. And the small and medium enterprises are very key in this. 90% of our businesses in Africa are in the category of micro, small, and medium enterprises. So we have what we call the African Union SME strategy, which is we are implementing with the regional economic communities and member states to really build capacity to the entrepreneurs so that they are able to expand their businesses. And the skill needs are very wide. They need to know the technical processes of producing high quality goods. They also need to know bookkeeping so that they're able to record the performance of their businesses. And with that, then they should be in a position to go and get bank credit. And we are also working with the Pan-African institutions, financial institutions across Africa. When we are in Niamey last year during the extraordinary summit on industrialization, the Pan-African financial institutions committed $2 million to provide capacity building products and programs for medium, small, and medium enterprises, so that on the basis of that training, they should be able to access credits using national banking systems. Mining is a backbone of Africa's economy. And in this respect, we've come up with a skills development program for women in mining. We are doing this in conjunction with the African Business Council, so that our women involved in this area can add value to the jewelry that they are producing. And similarly, Africa is a tourist destination. We are the low end of the global tourism value chain. So work is underway to work with the practitioners in the business to see how we can move Africa up in the global value chain in tourism. And the part of this is to create what we are going to call the Federation of African Tourism Associations. And again, Africa is an agricultural country. We have most of the land which is too virgin. We have a lot of water, but the tragedy is that we still import food. So we are working with our colleagues in agriculture to ensure that in the next 3 seasons or so, we are able to make Africa become self-sufficient in food. And a step in this direction has been established by Ethiopia, which 3 seasons ago went into producing wheat. And now they're able to meet national demand and export to the rest of the region. So there's a huge scope for really improving productivity in these areas. And of course, all this also requires harnessing science, technology, and innovation. And this is where we are very weak as a continent. We produced what we call the African Science, Technology, and Innovation Strategy, which is supposed to run from 2014 to 2024, which is going to end next year. And one of the commitments made in that strategy was that before 2024, Africa as a continent should commit 1% of our gross domestic product towards science, technology, and innovation. The reality is that we've just committed 0.5% of that. And when you compare with some countries around the world, some commit as much as 4.8% of their gross domestic product on research and development. Because when you do research and development, you come up with industrial goods which are very unique, differentiated, and you become more competitive. And you have intellectual property rights to your innovation. And that intellectual property rights also gives you leverage. When people wanted to use your technology, you can charge them. So Africa has no choice but to go towards science, technology, and innovation. And one of the recommendations I've made to the member states is that they should commit more funds towards research and development. And they should also have an annual forum bringing in the governments, the private sector, and the academic institutions to take stock of where we are in the journey towards innovation. Because if there is a dialogue among the three entities, then we shall be able to upgrade the process of science and innovation across the continent. Now, when we look at the industrial development of Africa, most of it is based on foreign direct investment. Now, with that, what it means is that the owners of the technology, they own the technology that we apply in industrial activities. They own the brand. They undertake the marketing. So that puts us at the low end of the global value chain in the field of manufacturing or agro-processing. But you change the situation if you start developing your own innovations. Then you are going to own the intellectual property rights. You are going to own the brand. You are going to undertake industrial design. You are going to do the marketing yourself. So you'll be on the higher end of the global value chain. So this is the message that we are giving to all the member states to say, the process of industrialization requires first and foremost to step back and say, what can we do to upgrade the process of research and development across Africa? Without that, we shall be on the low end of the global value chain. So these are some of the issues which I thought I could bring up in my introductory remarks, but I'm ready to answer any questions.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for that very interesting discussion. Thank you for what you've said. My question is just as you ended your presentation, you talked about the challenges that we face because we do not have the technology and also because we've not invested. So you find that most of the decisions that are made, and we are at a disadvantage because of not investing much in technology, research, and innovation. So just to get your thoughts on this, with the limitations we have, what are some of the interesting things and some of the highlights that, despite the challenges that we have, talked about Ethiopia, that they've managed to produce enough wheat. So what are some other examples, good examples that you can celebrate, even with the problems that we have in terms of technology, uptake of technology and innovation?
Well, there's a good story from your country. There's an agro processor in Tanzania who was teamed up with somebody from the United States of America in the area of cashew nuts. And they are able to look at the market, and they established that 90% of Africa's cashew nuts are exported as raw materials. And those countries go and add value to those cashew nuts, and they export them to the United States of America and other parts of the world. So they started with Tanzania, and right now, as we are speaking, 14 tons of processed cashew nuts are on their way to the United States of America. They meet the sanitary and phytosanitary standards of the United States of America. And they realize that they will not be able to meet demand just by concentrating on the venture in Tanzania. So about 6 days ago, they came to see us at the African Union to say, we'd like you to link us up to businesses across Africa who are involved in the production of cashew nuts, so that we work together in processing them, so that we've added value to that. And they told me that the market is huge. The annual cashew nut consumption in market across the world is $1 trillion. So there's huge scope. So we are linking them up to entrepreneurs across Africa and agricultural experts, so that they can partner up and start producing cashew nuts and processing them and exporting to the United States of America and other parts of the world.
Thank you. Godfrey Bahiigwa.
So my name is Godfrey Bahiigwa. I'm the Director of Agriculture and Rural Development of the AU Commission. So the work that we do, and this is under the Department of Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy, and Sustainable Environment at the African Union Commission. So my Directorate of Agriculture and Rural Development, broadly, we are responsible for developing continental policy frameworks to advance agricultural transformation on the continent, and also continental frameworks that promote rural livelihoods or rural development in general. So that is our mandate as a department. So what we do, basically we translate decisions and declarations that are taken by our member states into continental policy frameworks that guide implementation at regional level as well as national level. The AU Commission does not implement programs. We lead policy and strategy formulation, and that's important to know. The other mandate that we have as AU Commission or as my Directorate is on monitoring and reporting. So decisions are taken by heads of state. We translate them into continental policy frameworks and guidelines. Member states implement. Then we go back and track the progress that they are making in implementing those decisions and declarations, and we report back to the member states. So that's another important role that we do as the Commission. There are three other things that we do, but not in a very big way. So to some extent, we do capacity building. That's not a core mandate, but in the process of supporting our member states to develop policies as well as monitoring and reporting, we do capacity building, training country teams where we need data to be collected and analyzed from our member states. So we do capacity building. So that's an additional role, but not as big as the other two. We also do resource mobilization. The programs that we develop at the continental level, we don't always have adequate resources from our member states. So we find ourselves having to mobilize resources in order to implement the programs that have been endorsed by our member states. The third additional, which would be the fifth one, has to do with communication and advocacy. While we do have a dedicated Directorate of Information and Communication, but also at Directorate or department level, we also undertake communication and advocacy for the implementation of the policy frameworks and programs that we develop. So in a nutshell, that's what we do. Policy formulation, monitoring and evaluation, some capacity building, some advocacy and communication, as well as resource mobilization. But all this is in the interest of agricultural transformation on the continent to achieve the continental goals that have been set. Now, what drives our work as the Commission and department is basically the overall Agenda 2063. That is our overarching continental development framework that was adopted by member states in 2013. So all that we do, all that we develop is under Agenda 2063. In other words, it's meant to support the implementation and achievement of the aspirations under Agenda 2063. Coming down at sectoral level, we have the continental framework for agricultural transformation, which is CAADP, the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, that first started in 2003 in what was known as the Maputo Declaration. So heads of state and government adopted that CAADP agenda in Maputo 17 years ago. So that's what has been guiding our work since then. After 10 years of its implementation,
Thank you, Director, for your very interesting insights. How has technology and innovation contributed to the promotion of agriculture, and how has it helped to shape the way Africa is seen in terms of its sustainability, to feed its own people, to protect post-harvest loss, and to finance key sectors to make sure that Africa is food resilient? And where you said only 4 countries met that percent of 10% threshold funding. I would just like to know, what are the most notable successes that you have achieved in that department? And also, what are the challenges? And as we look forward, because this, as you look forward, what would you think that we as Africans need to change to make things better?
Yeah, thank you, Razia, for these questions. This concept of rebranding, exactly what do you mean by rebranding? Rebranding Africa?
According to the African Union, the Aspiration 7, when you talk about rebranding Africa, actually it's rebranding Africa and changing narratives and perspectives, where Africa is seen as a continent that is resilient, that is able to take care of itself and finance itself, and also Africa that has a say in international decision-making, and in terms of it brings something to the table. Like, for example, Africa being one of the fastest growing populations, we have foods, we have land. So you find that we as Africans have our own way of the way we treat, having that power that we have and the resources that we have, plus the technology. Can we stand and be counted in the world? Can we have a voice? Can we talk about agriculture, food security, and people listen to us because we have something to offer? We come as equal partners on the table when we talk about food security, talk about all those good things about agriculture. That's what it means.
Let me start with I was saying the international forum. During the still ongoing reforms of the African Union, which started in 2018, one of the tenets of those reforms was Africa speaking with one voice in international fora. And I can tell you, Razia, we have been doing very well in that front. For my department, I can give you a very specific example. In 2021, leading to the UN Food Systems Summit that was held in September in New York, my department led the formulation of what is known as the Africa Common Position to the UN Food Systems Summit. I actually was leading that work. We worked with ODA NEPAD. We brought on board the UN Economic Commission for Africa. We also solicited views and inputs from different constituencies, academia. We brought on board, for example, the forum, which is the Forum for African Universities. We brought on board the voices of the youth. We also organized parliamentarians. In other words, we use that opportunity to obtain as many diverse views on what people thought should be the game-changing pathways to transform Africa's agriculture. And we put that together in one document from all those voices. We brought together our ministers under the Specialized Technical Committee on Agriculture, Rural Development, Water and Environment. And we presented that to the ministers. They discussed, provided input, and we compiled all that into what was endorsed by those ministers as Africa's common position. And so when we went to New York, we presented as Africa. And my commissioner, Her Excellency Ambassador Joseph Asako, actually presented on behalf of President Tshisekedi, who was the chair of the African Union at that time. He couldn't be able to do it, but he delegated. Otherwise, it should have been President Tshisekedi presenting the Africa common position. So we have seen this aspiration or goal to speak with one voice actually working very well. And as we speak today, it is one of those documents that people are making reference to when it comes to Africa speaking with one voice. So we are making very good progress there. Now, and of course, other examples, if you have interacted with other departments, they will also give you examples where they have brought the continent together to speak with one voice. Another example from my department, but not my directorate, is on climate change. Every time we go to the international forum during the COP, the Conference of Parties on Climate Change, again, we mobilize our member states and we go with one voice. The most recent being COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. So I think Africa is doing quite well with regard to advancing our desire to present ourselves with one voice in international fora. Oh, I can give you a third example. A third example is when it comes to presenting African candidates for high-level international jobs. Again, Africa has come together and we always present a common candidate so that Africans don't go and start competing against each other in these positions. The recent example I can give you is the director of the World Health Organization, who is an Ethiopian, who is of Ethiopian nationality. His candidature was presented, debated, and endorsed by all member states. So when it came to voting, Africa voted with one. Another one was I don't know the exact title, but the Francophonie. This is the group of French-speaking countries. Again, Africa presented one common candidate. So I can tell you with those examples that Africa has gotten organized, and when it comes to important global issues, we are speaking with one voice. Coming down to agriculture, we need to do more because the statistics do not speak do not reveal a very good picture. We still have over 282 million hungry people on this continent. That means they don't have adequate food on a daily basis to feed themselves. So that's not a nice narrative. So when you say we want to rebrand ourselves, you know, we have some positives, but we also have to admit that we have some negatives as well. So I don't know how you, as a reporter or journalist, you would present a fact like that, that over 280 million people on this continent are hungry. Then Africa is still importing over $60 billion worth of food. In other words, we are relying on others to feed ourselves. That is a fact, and it's not a nice fact. So I don't know how you can use it when it comes to rebranding in this case. But what we can tell you is what we are trying to do is to put in place policies and strategies to reverse those ugly statistics that we have as a continent. And so everything that I discussed earlier around us translating the CAADP-Malabo Declaration into a continental business plan and using that business plan to support RECs and member states to develop national investment plans is what we do as African Union Commission to support our member states, but really the ultimate burden is on our member states themselves to make the investments and the policy reforms that are needed to bring about transformation. You cannot go to Kenya and force them to adopt improved maize varieties to produce more maize for the population, which is a staple commodity. If the soils are not good, you cannot force Kenya to increase fertilizer application rates. You can only appeal to the leadership of Kenya to be able to do so. Now, on the technology front, again, we advocate for adoption of modern inputs that have the benefit of the cutting edge scientific advances, whether it is improved animal breeds, improved crop varieties. We advocate for those, but again, we have a limitation because it has to be the country to test those seeds and animal breeds to make sure that they are appropriate for their farmers and promote their adoption. So again, we stop at advocacy. The actual implementation has to be by member states. The same thing with financing. You can only advocate for them to increase public expenditure to agriculture, and not for the sake of it. We do so with reason because the results from the biennial tracking that I mentioned earlier as an instrument for tracking implementation are there for the member states to see for themselves. And if I can take a minute to say a little bit more about that report, the 2021 report showed that only one member state out of the 51 that reported was on track towards achieving the CAADP goals and targets by 2025. Remember, I told you the declaration is 2015, 2025. So every 2 years we have been tracking to see the progress that each country is making towards attaining those targets by 2025. So in the 2021 report, only one member state, Rwanda, was on track towards meeting these goals and targets. And in that report, we actually present a summary for each of the member states that reported. So that report has 51 summaries for each of the 55 member states that reported. It shows how they have performed under each of the 7 CAADP-Malabo commitments, what their score is. But also, we provide recommendations on what each country ought to do. But what they do ultimately is up to them. Our role is to present to them what their scores are against each of those commitments and the recommendation that we provide to them on what they should do to improve performance. And through Doreen, we'll share with you a link. We have a link to a tool. We developed what we call the CAADP biennial review tool, which is online. It provides all these data that I'm talking about. So we have 3 reports, 2017, 2019, 2021. They are all online and accessible. And you can go and download data on Tanzania, on Uganda, or on Nigeria. You can compare performance of Nigeria against Ghana, Tanzania against Rwanda. You can compare performance against 49 indicators. We have 49 indicators that we track. They are available online for you to go and look at. And I really strongly encourage you to go and use that toolkit. You will learn a lot. For your information, the African Union is a member state-owned organization. And the 5 member states are sovereign states. What that means, Marie-Therese, is that the decisions that are taken can only be implemented out of the willingness of the member states. We cannot force any member state to implement any of the decisions that they have taken collectively. So the way I like to put it is that the African Union is a coalition of the willing, okay? We exist on the goodwill of these independent or sovereign member states.
Her Excellency, Abou Zeid.
A huge responsibility, and I'm holding you responsible, and I'm waiting to see and hear your articles and the work that you are doing in order to promote the Africa that we want, the Africa that no one is seeing, and the huge, the really awful pictures and stories and messages that we are seeing across the board, not only in non-African media, but in our own media, and this has to change. This has to change. So you have, it's both a request and it's a responsibility for you to carry these messages and to show the good. I'm not saying that anyone should cover up on bad deeds. No, that's your role as well. Media is a watchdog, and it's the fourth power. But it is important that we also promote and encourage and show the good examples, the good things that are happening in our continent, and to help change the cultural image or the stereotypical image of Africa and Africans in our mindset, and also in the mindset of non-Africans. That also helps a lot with promoting investments, because investments and business people, they read the media and they take the first impressions from what they read. So we showcasing many of these good examples will also help with the partnership.
Thank you for joining us. This has been indeed an eye-opening program, and we've gained great insights on how the African Union works. For those people who did not know, the African Union does not implement projects. Its overall mandate is to develop continental policy frameworks to advance the different mandates and translate decisions and declarations into policy formulation for member countries to work on the policies. As the Director of Agriculture and Rural Development, Godfrey Bahiigwa, noted that the African Union is a coalition for the willing, and that member states, although they sign into these agreements, but it's upon them to implement them, and they cannot be forced by the African Union to implement them. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Discovering Africa Through Technology. We hope you have enjoyed our conversation with Her Excellency Amani Abou Zeid, His Excellency Ambassador Alfred Chiza Muchanga, and also Godfrey Bahiigwa. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. So please share your feedback and ideas with us through our social media handles and email. And remember to subscribe to our podcast to be notified of future episodes. Join us next time as we continue our journey of discovering Africa with Razia Kulatein Mwanga. This podcast was developed with support by the African Union through the African Union Agenda 2063 Pitch Zone Awards, a partnership with the African Women in Media. Its contents are the sole responsibility of the producer and do not necessarily reflect the views of African Women in Media and the African Union. Thank you.